Welcome everyone to this afternoon's session. I'm Jessica Hartshorn. I'm an illustrator and artist and educator, and we've also got here Fiona, who is from the National Paralympic Heritage Trust. We're going to be delivering the session for you this afternoon, and it's really great to see you all. We're going to start off with a presentation which I'm going to deliver for you, and it's all about working with creative practitioners. We're going to have a session in the middle where we're going to answer some of your questions, so do feel free to put those in the chat. We have already been sent some in advance, and then Fiona's going to do a presentation on the work that she's done with creative practitioners, and then finally we're going to have a case study that we're going to go through. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about working with creative practitioners today. I'm going to particularly be focusing on the Hidden Histories project, which I actually worked on with Sporting Heritage. Fiona, can you see my screen?
I can see your screen, but it seems to have stopped moving.
Oh, there we go. Excellent. Okay, so as I mentioned, what we're going to cover is we're going to be talking about what actually is a creative practitioner, the different ways that museums can work with artists and creatives, things that you might need to have in place, what are the impact and the benefit. We're going to be answering your questions, we're going to hear from Fiona, and we're going to look at a case study. So first of all, just to introduce myself a little bit more, I'm Jessica Hartshorn, an illustrator and educator, and I specialise particularly in working with galleries and museums. And that comes from I worked in galleries and museums for over 17 years before I became a freelancer in an education department as the education manager. And I really sort of loved working with collections, and I trained as an illustrator in my degree, so I've decided to combine those two loves and work with museums now to bring their collections to life. So let's think about what does a creative practitioner actually mean. So I'm going to take it from the basis that some people here today may not ever have worked with artists in their museum or their organisation, right through to people that perhaps have experience. So we have lots of different sections of creative practitioners, from visual artists, so they could be illustrators, artists, designers, photographers, animators and printmakers, through to more, I suppose, creative performance. So the performing arts, such as dancers, reenactors, storytellers, musicians, spoken word actors, and also people like makers, so textile artists, ceramicists, silversmithing, wood, sort of any sort of creative practice really. And when I was working in the museum, I had lots of different people that I worked with, and I almost made it sort of part of my role to try and work with lots of different people with the collections. And they can really bring a lot to your organisation. So I just want to show you a few images here of some of those examples. So we've got in the top corner there a fossil that's been knitted, and that was part of a knitted trail where items from the collection were knitted and put around the town in Warwick. In the bottom corner, I was working on a dementia project where we were creating a big textile banner with a textile artist. In the middle, we worked with a life model, and she dressed as a particular character from one of the items in the collection. It's Dorothy Fielding, who was the first ambulance driver in the Second World War. The First World War. And we had a life drawing session in the gallery space where we actually painted the model in the costume. We've also got storytelling of the collection and also singing. So really a broad range of creative practitioners. But why would you even think of that? You know, you might be happily, merrily going along and everything might be fine. Well, from my point of view, I've always felt that creative practitioners can be thinking outside of the box, and what they create or what they do might be quite eye-catching. It might create a buzz around your collections. It might raise the profile, especially if they've got a high profile already. So really create something new and different. They might develop something quite bespoke and specialist for your collection, and that can bring awareness to lots of different audiences. They might also enable stories or objects to become more accessible for different audiences, and particularly things like storytelling or dance with your collections, using those untold stories as themes can really make it more accessible for certain audiences. They can attract new people, and you might actually approach your collection in a different way through different eyes. And also there's benefits to the artists, you know, they will be looking at something new for them, a challenge perhaps, and you know, they might be adding to their portfolio. I'm sure they'll be learning lots, so there's something that will benefit them as well. So there's lots of different ways that you can work with creative practitioners. And I've listed a few here, but there's probably lots more. So that can start from actually commissioning artwork. So that might be something that's maybe a painting or yeah, a big sort of mural or something like that. It might be more educational. So that's more what I do, illustrating bespoke colouring sheets or trails or maps, games and jigsaws and resources. It might be delivering workshops in your setting. So I've got a few photos here where that, you know, you're using your collection as inspiration. It might be that it's a project or a residency where you're working long-term with an artist. It could be public art, so a big sculpture in front of your building, or it could be a big mural. Or it might be you commission an artist to create something linked to your collection that you then sell in your shop, so mugs or bags or that sort of thing, so bringing you income. So one of the key questions I've been asked so far is sort of the practicalities, and that's often what might scare people. So I wanted to cover that a little bit. So when we're working with artists, I've just put together some points of the key things you might want to think about. So for me as an artist, particularly as an illustrator, having a really clear brief is the best thing I can have, really. And I know it's not always possible, but the clearer the brief is, the easier it is, I suppose, for the process. And some of the things that you might want to include, obviously it depends on what it is you're commissioning. So obviously an overview to start off with of what you want the artist to actually do. So for example, as an illustrator, it might be illustrate a front cover of a museum brochure with these key trees in it, or this item from the collection. You also need to agree the process and the roles everyone involved will have. And you may wish to provide sort of images for reference. And I know, again, for me, it's really useful if clients provide examples of what they like. So it might be other people's brochures, so they like a style or a particular layout. So the more information you can provide, the nearer it will be to what you have in your head. We also need to think about copyright and what you have copyright of. Things like format and size, whether it's colour or black and white. And then think about your timescales. So when does it need to be completed, and agree a range of milestones along the way. Linked to that is obviously the costings and the payment agreements. And I know that a lot of artists, that's the difficult area, but also it's not everyone gets paid or get paid on time. So if you want to butter up your artist, pay them on time. That's the best advice I could give you. As an illustrator or artist, they might have their own contract because of copyright and distribution rights. So you can check with them, and if not, you might have your own contract or draw one up together. And finally, if you're not sure about a project or you're not sure what you want, that's absolutely fine as well. And, you know, that's what the artists are often there for, is to kind of come with their ideas and their creativity. So it's about that compromise and bringing what you think you might like or examples, and then the artist might be able to support you in that process. So it doesn't always have to be totally set in stone. It depends on what the project is. So the artists can support you. Okay, So that is more if you're commissioning some artwork. If you're actually running workshops, which is very slightly different, again, still have a bit of a brief for the artist of what you would like them to do in that session or workshop or project. So for example, run a 2-hour workshop linked to Vikings for roughly age 7 to 12 in the learning room. So for me, that's sort of got all the key information, so who I'm aiming my workshop for, how long it's going to be, what the theme is, and where I'm going to be. It's also useful to know, obviously, if the parent's staying or if they're going to be on their own, and also if there's a fee. So have you got to administer any sort of taking of money, or is that all sorted for you? So those sort of practicalities of your venue are important too. Another thing to really think about your spaces that you're going to do your workshop in. So think about accessibility, think about the equipment, and that's something you can discuss with the artist. Think about the facilities that the artist might require. So do they need a sink to wash brushes, or do they need lots of tables or floor space? Do they need power sockets? And also agree all of that in advance. If you've got people booking on, again, agree that system. So is it free of charge? Will you have a register? And think about that health and safety aspect, because you know your venue far better than the artist will. So they will be able to provide a health and safety risk assessment on the activity that they're going to create, but you need to have responsibility for the physical space, where the fire exits are, where the first aid box is. But you also need to let them know about your safeguarding policy. So what are your regulations for reporting issues? Have you got an extra person to support the session, or be a member of contact if the artist, for example, needs to take their child to the toilet if it's not nearby? So all those sort of safeguarding issues need to be thought about. And as I said, same as before, costings and payment needs to be agreed. And they might also need a DBS check, and at the moment lateral flow tests as well. And as I said, support staff, so let them know who the key contact might be on the day, because often if it's a Saturday you might not be there, for example. So how do they get in touch with somebody if something goes wrong or they can't make it or something like that? And if you're not sure, sorry, it's gone back. And again, if you're not sure what you want, talk to the artist, because they'll probably have a backlog of workshops that they can kind of fall upon. And I'd draw up a contract, or at least an email that states very clearly all the things that you've agreed. Okay, so that's my sort of start off of our session today, to give you an overview of the sort of very basics of working with creative practitioners. What we're going to do now, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. We're going to go to our panel questions. So hello, Fiona again.
Right, hi.
So thank you everyone for sending in the questions. If you have got any other questions for us about working with creative practitioners, do drop them in the chat. But otherwise we'll kind of get started on the questions that we've already been sent. So Fiona, I'll read the questions out, and then we can perhaps both jump in to answer them, if that's okay. So I put out the question about what are the barriers to organisations and what do they face when they're thinking about working with an artist or a creative practitioner. So what are those kind of key things that might put you off? Did you want to go first, Fiona, of like how, well, one person said it's time pressures and the kind of commitments that you already have as staff. That was one of the responses. Did you want to talk a bit about that?
I think that's quite an interesting question, because I work with you, obviously, but I also work with artists doing workshops, and we've also commissioned an artist to do one piece of work. So we're kind of looking at it from different areas. I'm fairly new to this environment because my background's PE for the last sort of 20 years. So coming into it and creating resources from a PE point of view, I will have done that as lesson plans, etc., and so forth. So obviously that does take time, but you need to do that background, so you have to do that work. Doing stuff for the museum, I think the point is that whatever you're creating with somebody else. It's a collaborative process, so actually it cuts down the time. And I think there might be a myth that you think you've got to be the creative person, you've got to rely upon your own imagination, and you've got to feed all the ideas in. That hasn't been the process that I've experienced with Jess at all. I have ideas, and then I come to Jess and we talk, and out of that, I mean, Jess has got so much experience in education. She's got this massive background, which actually she brings to everything that we've put together. So I think that's crucial. And also because she's done her homework, she's kind of learned the resources and the sort of values behind our resources and why we're doing things. And it's that relationship building, it cuts the time down eventually, because as soon as you've started that process and you've got somebody on board and they're doing the same thing as you're on the same path. So actually, from a time point of view, as long as you're, as Jess said, very clear, if you're clear about what you want to achieve and you communicate well, actually, I find that, I have so much confidence in Jess that it's like I've got this idea and I play with this idea with her, and then, off she goes. And there's always a backwards and forwards. There's quite a lot of backwards and forwards with my last project, wasn't there? Sensory stuff. It's all to the benefit. And I suppose what I'd also like to say is everything you produce, you can use over and over again. You've got the opportunity. You're not creating something just for one reason or one use. So everything you do create, it's got a longer life. So I think for me that's quite important to remember.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, about that reusing. I know that on your, a lot of the projects we've done together, and also with some of the sporting heritage stuff, we've reused a lot of the images already, so it's got a bigger lifespan than, like, say, just that one project. And I think it's always hard for everybody with time, but I think sometimes it's because people have to spend the money that they've got really quickly, and sometimes it's just sort of a struggle because you're not quite sure what you're doing. So it's, like you say, starting from scratch, isn't it, building a relationship. But I think in terms of funding, I think it's deciding on what you can physically do. So, be realistic about what's possible, and the artist being honest about what's possible for them, and that can help with that kind of management of time. I think sometimes it's easy. I know a lot of artists that just get really carried away and go, oh my goodness, we could do this, we could do this. But obviously, if you've got a short time span of potentially not much budget, when you come down to it, you can't do everything. So sometimes artists need reining in a little bit, and sometimes it's the other way. Sometimes as an organisation you might have to say, okay, yes, that's great, but let's think about what we can do now and maybe look more long term. So unfortunately sometimes it is being realistic, isn't it, as we found with some of these projects, about what's achievable. Okay, yeah. So Tim's just. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to ask you a
question about something. Oh, Jess, you've gone on mute.
Oh, there we go. Tim's identified some fans that are creatives, which is brilliant, and to actually get them involved in projects. I think that's a brilliant idea. And also, young people as well, and colleges and places where they're looking for briefs is a good idea. Sorry, Fiona, you was going to say something.
No, I was just interested in, because I thought it might be useful, because I've worked with you now for nearly a year, but before that you worked with the NPHT and you created the resources that we used, so virtual resources and the school's resources. And I wondered how much, the time, when we're talking about time, it's your time as well, isn't it? So my point being that if you do want to engage with an artist, surely it's better to engage with an artist who's going to be with you for a period of time, because you then have that opportunity to develop the brand, to develop something that is recognizable as your style, and you have confidence in that artist, so therefore you know that the next time you come together, you've already done all that groundwork. So I mean, you'll be able to tell me how much time it took for you to develop this this brand that we have, but I feel that's like a lovely recognizable resource style that we've got, because we've worked with you for such a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely I know lots of other artists as well that are sort of long-termly work with organisations, and not just because of that brand side, but also a bit of the time aspect. So I know the collection really well now at the National Paralympic Heritage Trust, and actually that's been really useful working on the Sporting Heritage project, because I can go straight away, oh, I know they've got that in their collection, that will fit really nicely. So that helps with time as well. But also it is good to have that mixture of getting sort of new people in with fresh ideas, and I suppose it depends on what you're doing, doesn't it? Definitely illustration and graphic design and that side of things, I think it's good to be consistent. When it comes to things like workshops or projects or residencies, it's probably good to have a real mix of different people. Fab. I'll move on to the next. Somebody sent in something about funding, so saying that that's probably one of the biggest barriers for a lot of people. I was sort of going to say that I agree. And I know when I was working as a museum education officer, that was often, you know, the biggest barrier is not having the money to pay someone, and you might have brilliant ideas, but you just can't do it. Over time, I developed lots of relationships with funders, so I found out good funders that were good to go to regularly, and that give maybe smallish pots of around £1,000 or £2,000, as well as the bigger funders. Tesco is one of them, so they have regular kind of the blue discs that you put in, and if you apply for those, the application is very short. It does need to be community engagement in some way, but that can include sort of creation of artwork. So I recently did a mural for a school who had used a Tesco fund to do that. You're pretty much, if you get through to the first bid, which pretty much most people do, you're guaranteed money. And that might be a smaller pot or a higher pot, depending on how many blue tokens you get. But there are funding little pots out there that you can get little bits for. I would suggest as well looking at the application process of different pots, because I've seen application processes for £200 that are the same length of application as an Arts Council fund that might be £10,000. So obviously, if that's the case, you would need to, you know, go for something where the money is higher if you're spending the same amount of time on it. So, you know, bear those sorts of things in mind. If an application's quite long but it's not for much money, but there's a bigger fund and it's the same application process, you know, weigh it all up, I would say. Fiona, have you, because I know you've applied for quite a lot of funding, haven't you? Have you got any advice on?
We live on funding. So it's really important, and I mean, our CEO Vicky Hope Walker is just brilliant at finding money. And I was given some money through the cultural outreach group for Buckinghamshire cultural strategy to realise a project which we'll talk about in a bit. So yeah, it's just kind of keeping an eye out and talking to people, like you say, Jess. Just, you know, people know things that perhaps you don't, and I kind of think like visual resources are so important for so many different types of people. And you know, if you're committed to being an inclusive organisation, you know, the visual side of things is so important. So it's not something that you should say is an add-on. It's kind of like it is part of the process of whatever it is you're producing, I think.
Definitely. One thing you could do is, if you've got a particular artist in mind that you want to work with, is either ask the artist to write the application and build into that grant money for them to do that. So, for example, the project that I've just done with Sporting Heritage, which was a year-long Arts Council fund, I actually wrote the application. So it was sort of very low sort of capacity needed to go into it, just sort of a few paragraphs from Sporting Heritage and a little bit of input and then checking and proofing. So some artists, not all artists can do that, but quite a lot of artists are used to putting applications. So either share that load and do a bit each, or if there's opportunity for obviously it is time for the artists. Some might be prepared to do the application for free if it means that they then get work out of it. Others, if it's a big application like the Arts Council, you can build a bit of their time into the application itself. So that's something just to bear in mind, that it doesn't always have to be you as an organisation. And actually, in this case, the Arts Council bid that I applied for was a freelancer pot of money. So Sporting Heritage couldn't have applied for it. I had to do it. So, there's also that opportunity to going through an artist might mean you get access to something you wasn't able to do without the artist, if that makes sense. And then I think some of the funding that you've applied for recently is artist specific, isn't it,
Yes.
Fiona?
Yeah, so I'm working on 2 other projects, and part of that is we work with Paralympians, but we also work with disabled artists, and then another project where we're commissioning one artist for a piece of work. So it's just, we've just been very lucky, I think, with those things to do that. And it's just great experience because it's all really different opportunities for us.
I'll move on to the other thing. So someone sort of says, how do you find the artists? So, if you're starting out and you don't know where to look, have you got any pointers, Fiona, of how you found your artists for your project?
Yeah, well, I did an open call, so I had to write a brief, which does take a bit of doing, because you do have to really be clear about what it is you're looking for. So for the main project I'm working on, I was targeting disabled artists, but I wanted a range of practice. So I've got a dance specialist, I've got visual artists, I've got songwriters, I've got spoken word, and I really wanted that, and I was just really, really lucky. But that did take a lot of time, and I'm not going to lie, it did, because you had to write the brief, you had to then find where to advertise, and I had a really, really dedicated volunteer who helped me with that. She went out, she identified all those areas. I mean, she is an artist herself, so she had an understanding of where she might look for work, so that was very useful. And so that was, I mean, I couldn't have done it without that background work that she put together, to be fair.
And could you mention some of the places that you did advertise? That might be useful for some organisations.
My memory. So Unlimited is one that I'm thinking of. Local. Well, anytime I went to an exhibition, I would always pick up a card. So I'd always have that reference, and it's when you start talking to people as well. You might, because I didn't just send out an email. I phoned them all up. And I had conversations with them. I wasn't like, I just want some artists, can you do this, that and the other. I'd actually conversed with them and talked to them about where to find people. Local art groups, it's just being as open-minded as possible, really. It was an interesting process.
Yeah, I think, local art groups are a good starting point, aren't they? And then talking to other people who, those artists might know other people, especially if it's a specialist area. Some other organisations that I find that are good nationally, Engage are gallery educators, and it's like a national umbrella organisation, and they have a supplier list, so people that are freelancers that deliver different art related activities, and they are specialists to the cultural sort of area. GEM, which is gallery and museum educators, again they're specialists to this sector. There's Museum Freelance, which are again an umbrella body that focus on freelancers in museums, but that goes across creatives as well. So they do things like templates for a lot of organisations, so like contracts and, anything you need to know, like pay rates and all that sort of thing are on there. So that's quite useful if you're literally starting out. and AN, which is artist newsletter, and they can do call outs to sort of say, you know, we're looking for, and they go out to lots of different artists. So there are lots of different places. I think actually the Arts Council also do a bit of a call out bit, so you can send something to them as well. So lots of different places. I think someone, yeah, Tim's also said sort of heritage societies might do call outs as well. Yeah, and yes, a lot of people don't know that the organisations exist, so it is that awareness, isn't it? Okay, so I think that's all the question. Oh, one more question just about expectations. So someone was sort of saying, how do you sort of get those expectations right between the organisation and the artists? Because sometimes, as I said earlier, artists can have these crazy ideas and, you know, it's hard to fulfil those, or as an organisation, you've got other things that are kind of barriers within the organisation to really let their project take place in the creative way that the artists want. So, you know, how do you go about those expectations, really? Have you experienced that at all, Fiona?
Yeah, well, I think it's key, isn't it, that you have to have good communication. You have to be really clear in your own mind about what you want to achieve. That's vital. And I think if there's any woolliness or grey area, it's going to come out. It's going to come out, and it could be expensive. So, you know, I do think that's really important. When I was working with an artist, I had to make it very clear about. I don't want to say too much about what I was worried about. I think it was the timing mainly of the workshop, and it was based on my experience as a PE teacher. So I knew that this wasn't going to work. And I just think you do have to have confidence in your own experience, and communicate that, because you want success. So that success is dependent upon that process. So I think that's important, that you don't think, oh, because I'm not the creative, I don't have an input. You do. It's your bag. It's your project. You need to be responsible. I think that's the key for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been in situations before when I was working in the gallery as the education officer, where, you know, all your spaces. So being, we once had someone that just wanted to sort of paint everywhere on the walls and splatting on the ceiling, and it was kind of in the gallery space, and, you know, we had the curators in the corner rocking, and so I think it's, you know, being really realistic about, okay, if you want a really creative, crazy workshop, then maybe put it somewhere where they can deliver that, because also you don't want to hamper the artist if that's what you're getting them in for, or you get a different type of artist that's more suitable for the space. So it's that realism again, isn't it? Sort of thinking about, well, what do you want to achieve, and is that actually possible in that space? And I think also, in terms of that boundaries thing and sort of challenging what you can do as an organisation, I think there is that two option thing of either scaling it back and fitting it in the spaces and, you know, the reality of what you think you can do, or challenging it. You know, is that, I've done that before, again, in my old job, of, oh no, we can't do this. Well, why can't we do this? You know, what are we going to bring by challenging it and doing it? You know, if we're going to bring more audiences in, it's going to be, you know, amazing. It's going to, you know, have all these benefits. So what actually, is it just because we've never done it before, or is it because there's actually real reasons? And I think, you know, sometimes you can't change things and sometimes you can, and it can be amazing. So I think, you know, there is those two options, and it's the picking your battles thing, isn't it? You know, sort of working out what the biggest benefit is going to be, and actually if it's possible by making a few minor changes, or just speaking up.
And then thinking about the projects we've just finished, you know, having some conversations about doing them in stages. So yeah, think about where you want to be eventually, but notice the stages in between and perhaps explore those, because they may be more achievable. And then you've got the pilot, you can decide whether that's worked or not, and then you can go further. And I think personally that the last project we've just been doing together, the sensory sensory integration project is a key point there, because, you know, we can't, you with something like that, with something that's fairly new, it's better to walk first and ensure that it's going to work, and then you can try new things, and then your imagination can then take off, because you have the confidence and you've got the experience behind you then of something that has worked. So yeah, I think again, it's communication, isn't it? It's very important.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to move back to the presentation now. Fiona's going to talk about some of the work that she's done with me, but also some of the projects as well. Okay, I'll hand over to you, Fiona.
All right, well, this is a lovely slide, and I showed this yesterday as well. Jess, you'll be pleased to say. Yeah. And it always makes me smile because I love the colours. So this, one of the things that I wanted to do, I've just finished a project where I was given some money to realise some research that I'd done whilst I was working at a special educational needs school. And I was really, I really wanted to improve the pre-visit material for people with sensory processing needs, and for anyone who has anxieties about going to new places. So I had a wonderful volunteer who's got some background in working with people with autism, and also some academic sort of background to how people were behaving when they moved into spaces during COVID and that sort of thing. So trying to create a resource that was suitable for those people, and also for other people as well who might have sensory needs. So you can see there are two images, the one on the left hand side, hold on, I'm not sure which way how you're actually seeing this, but the one in the middle, let's say, is the sensory map, as is on the lower right hand of the screen, is also the sensory map. And we did this, Jess and I, after I kind of did a bit of reading, and I didn't know how to do this. And I thought, well, this is just such a brilliant idea. A sensory map's just a fantastic idea for people who need to have a little bit of reassurance. Our museum is inside a sports stadium, so you can imagine it's actually it can potentially be quite noisy. You've got people on gym equipment, you've got music, you've got a lot of areas where there's busyness. So the sensory map seemed to be a really important thing to produce. And we did this together. Jess and I came together. We and some of my old sixth formers came to the Heritage Centre, and we walked around the site and had a look at it, and kind of just talked about areas where we felt there may be triggers for people who have sensory needs. And it was just such a lovely experience, wasn't it? It was just like a really nice hour with these young people. And then Jess just literally went away and created these two lovely maps, and I was able to test them with another group of children actually just last week. And because they're tangible, they're colourful, they're interesting, they're easy to follow, it was lovely to see the children holding on to them and following with their finger the little white arrows to get them into the Heritage Centre. And it's also something they could take away with them, because it's so colourful, it's so engaging, and it's something to take home to their families. So it's a nice resource. And of course, it's something that can be used over and over again. It's also something that goes on the website. It's something people can download. So the expense doesn't have to be yours. You don't have to wear that expense of printing it all off. And then the top is one of the examples of the tours that we have. We've got several tours that Jess has created for us. And I think this sheet, if you can see it at all clearly, the questions, there's questions involved in there, there's knowledge. And this for me is the epitome of what I'm talking about with working with Jess, is that she's taken the trouble to learn about the trust. She knows our values, she understands what we're about, she's taken the trouble to learn about the history. All her experience as an education manager all comes into these resources. She knows how to communicate information at different levels. I mean, our resources span from key stage, well, early years, right up to key stage 4. I just think, you know, the range is incredible. And you can see that when you read these, there's knowledge that you as an adult will acquire from reading from these resources as well. As you can see, they're colourful, they're engaging, and then they have, you can see there's a branding. There's kind of like, it looks like it fits together, and that's what I like about it as well. So what's the next? What else have we got? We've got. Have you got another slide to show? I can't hear you.
Bear with me a moment. I think it's frozen. Let me just click on it. Oh, there we go.
Oh, lovely. Oh, yes, that's lovely. So, I was thinking about reusing things. So on the left-hand side, we've got Learn to Draw Mandeville, who's the Stoke Mandeville mascot from London 2012. And I noticed Jess was doing these draw-alongs. I think it was on LinkedIn I saw them, and I just loved them. So I went to Jess and said, do you think you could do one for us? And she did these lovely little video, and it's proved one of our most popular activities. And I've used it 3 times now, I think, at different times of the year. So again, it's accessible. You also, I think, created a colouring in sheet for us, which was connected.
Yeah, so we used a line drawing for a colouring in sheet. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's lots of depth to this. It's not just one resource. There's levels to it, and as I say, it's something that can be reused. And then the values of the games is an example of a sheet that's for the earlier years of the resources. And these are sorts of things, again, that you can put them in lots of different ways, lots of different contexts. So you have, when you're producing stuff for holidays, we're going to be actually creating a sort of a package. Some of these resources I've put together as part of a recovery curriculum. So, you know, you don't want to overuse them, but you can use them in different ways, and they can target different audiences. And as you know, again, it's using knowledge, which I haven't had to feed in, which I think when you're thinking about the timings of creating things, it's now Jess knows so much, you know, I can go to her and she's basically telling me sometimes what's in the collection, or how to use it, how it could be used, and creating activity boxes and resources. I mean, we have this amazing new resource which is connected with the National Spinal Unit, which Jess has created as an activity box, and it's going to have it has different activities for the schools to get engaged with. And she's found this colourful spine, which will help us to explain the impact of spinal injury. And she'd also created this game where the children could actually visualise what it means to have a spinal cord injury, and how that might impact upon your life. And it's very accessible learning. That's Jess. That's not something I've put together. So that's very impressive, I thought. And you're also creating some STEM resources for us connected with the spinal unit, which will be national curriculum standard. And I think that's also really important, isn't it? It's the fact that the artist that you're working with has other facets to their personality, has other knowledge. And it's impressive when you can see how that can all come together in a project, like a creative project like this. Here's a great example. This little jigsaw is a great example of reusing things, because this was a picture from a different resource, and then we made it into a jigsaw. So it's lovely, and it's something that's accessible to everybody. We also created one with just straight lines, so we could and I sort of did a little game that we associated with sort of PE activity that we used for that, for like an orienteering type of activity. So you can use your own imagination as well to create things alongside these resources. Yeah, and I think that's what's, I love it. I just love that side of things, where you can use your own experience and come together with somebody else who's creative, and you never know what you're going to come up with. So I hope that's good.
Yeah. Did you want to say any more about the project you're doing with the disabled artists at the moment?
Yeah, so this project is it's relating to we're trying to get stories from communities about the Paralympic Games, because obviously there's a huge history in our area, and a lot of people don't really know what information they actually have in their attics or in their photograph albums. You know, there's an awful lot of information out there. So what we're trying to do is encourage people to talk and give them those opportunities. And we find that with activity, you do create those forums for people to relax a little bit and then perhaps even explore their own imagination. And so yeah, so I'm working with Paralympians who are obviously going to be speaking about their own experiences and helping to give some context to the project. But then, as I say, I've got 12 completely different types of artists who are going to come into schools, work with communities as well, and to break down those barriers between understanding disability and ability, and also giving, as I say, those opportunities for people to come together and explore different ways of expressing themselves. And that's what's so wonderful. The dance artist I work with, it was just amazing how positive the space was, and the conversations that took place afterwards and beforehand and during they were facilitated by the fact that she was working with them. I worked with an incredibly interesting graphic design artist who we did this all virtually, and she was just pushing these young people, year 9s, in different directions with their thought processes. And I was able to use some of Jess's materials when I was engaging with that school, because Jess has created some resources for Key Stage 4, which are more related to people talking about disability and challenging how they think about it. And because I'm working with a disabled artist as well and a Paralympian, that subject matter's out there, and it's breaking down those complicated barriers which often happen with discussing things which people feel a little bit uncomfortable about. So I don't think you could do that just by going in cold. Yes, you can do assemblies. Yes, you can talk about your agenda, but I think you do need different ways of accessing people, and that we all know that people learn in different ways. There's several different ways of learning, and yeah, I feel really privileged to be able to work with artists, because it's not just the fact that you're accessing information in different ways. It's really engaging for you as a person, as well as a learning officer. It's very satisfying to know that you're getting to people, you're actually able to communicate with them. So
yeah, I think that's one thing we've not really touched on actually, is that well-being effect. And I know 100% that it has a huge impact on people's well-being. And the people that I've spoken to during lockdown that started a new creative project, who aren't normally creative, from embroidery to knitting to painting to reading to lots of different things, and that just really showed that was one of the key things that kept our well-being going during that difficult time. And I do really very much believe that it really helps us to slow down. It helps us to get that other side, the left side of our brain going, being creative and thinking outside the box, all those different things are so important. I'm running a separate project at the moment with older adults, and just like I said, those conversations while we're doing and we're making and we're creating, we're having all these really lovely conversations that are really relaxed, and that probably would never have happened if we weren't in that kind of relaxed environment. So it can be so important.
Yeah.
And those conversation starters from perhaps the topic that you're working on as well, definitely. Okay, so we've just got 10 minutes left of our session. So is there anything else you'd like to say, Fiona, before I move on to the Hidden Histories Illustrated project?
No, I think I've covered everything I wanted to say, actually. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. And if you think of anything else, just pop in. Okay, so I'm just going to share with you my screen. So I'm going to finally, the last 10 minutes, just briefly talk about the Hidden Histories Illustrated project that I've been working with Sporting Heritage over the last 12 months. We've just finished that now. The project came out of a range of different things. I'd done one very short project with Sporting Heritage as a result actually of working with Fiona, coming from the Paralympic as a recommendation. And it was sort of quite clear after that first project that there wasn't really much of an education programme at the time. It's built a huge amount in this last year. So it's something we wanted to address, is that engagement with younger people and families. It was also a time when last October, when we were going into our second lockdown, and there was potential of further lockdowns. So during that time, museums themselves were reporting back to Sporting Heritage that they were struggling with capacity to get resources out to people, as some weren't open at the time, so museums were still closed in some areas. Yet at the same time, there was this building of need for resources online from families, because they were isolating, or they were going into this second lockdown. So it was quite obvious that we needed something else as a follow-on from the first project, which you can see here on the treasure map. So it was a response to COVID-19. And we really wanted to focus in on those hidden histories and those ignored histories. So what we did is we created 8 free downloadable resources, and we worked with a range of different sporting museums through Sporting Heritage, and they submitted items from their collections for me to then illustrate and create into some sort of activity. And throughout the 12 months, we had a real range of activities, from a Christmas one, which was cutting and sticking and matching images to text, colouring in sheets. We had digital jigsaws. You can see at the bottom there, we built a 3D museum where we had different themes, disability in sport, women in sport, and really unusual objects. And museums submitted objects to go into that. We had digital games, which were sort of tapping on your iPad to correlate matching items, such as sport and fashion. You can see in the bottom corner, we had the old school sort of cut and stick and dress an athlete, where you fold over the little tabs. One of our most popular ones was the Female Sporting Heroes card game, which was based on Top Trumps, and that was really, really, really popular. We also created a digital matching game, a memory game, and we had sort of it's nearly over 3,000 hits on that now. So it was really popular, and it had lots of interest from the media in that. We had lots of TV, radio interviews and things. We had, I think, about 25 females that were nominated from different museums or archives or sporting organisations, and we created a Top Trumps card style for each one of those. And we also had a little fact file about those different females. And then finally, we've literally just had our family quiz, sporting family quiz, which was a digital multiple choice quiz. So that was the year long of kind of interpreting those collections. And here I've just got a quote from Carly from the Hockey Museum. And she sort of said that, it wasn't just about bringing those histories to life, really. I think one of the key things is it was nice to collaborate with everybody else, and often the people that I was working with would report that they'd learned quite a lot because they'd not worked with artists before, so it's sort of a bit of learning for them. But as a whole, the capacity that they had, you know, they didn't have to provide too much. It was just a bit of information and an image, and then I, again, like Fiona said, I'd go away and kind of do it all for them. So it was quite sort of low workload for those people. But the actual impact and the reach of these resources went far and wide, and we engaged lots of new audiences. Lots of new people started to sort of follow sporting heritage and just be aware that it existed. And we also looked at the crossover between museums. So if one museum was posting about somebody else's resource, or their sporting heritage hero, or is my hero better than your hero, you know, it just kind of created a nice buzz around sporting heritage and education. And that's just me creating a little bit of the resource at the end there. So yeah, the project as a whole was wonderful, and it was really nice for me as an illustrator to see all those wonderful collections pop into my inbox and enable me to sort of learn about different histories. But from what I hear from the organisations, it came at a time when they needed additional support. But now we've got this beautiful bank of bespoke illustrations that can be used again and changed, maybe printed off instead of being digital. So, you know, it's kind of there as a legacy aspect as well. So yes, I think that's it from me today. Is there any other questions from everybody out there that you'd like to ask? And some people said demystifying a lot of elements and infected us with enthusiasm. Oh, thanks. I think the key thing is to talk to artists. You know, they're not scary people, or generally they're not. And I do think I don't know if you feel this, Fiona, you'll get a gut feeling if you're going to work with someone quite well, you know, whether you're on the same wavelength, and you get that gut feeling if, oh, actually this isn't going to work. And I think, you know, go with that a little bit if you feel that you've had a chat with someone and actually it's just doesn't feel right, fit with what you do, your ethics, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's very important, because they do need to share your values, your mission statement. It's got to be really clear that you are on the same page, and then it becomes a really profitable association.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Really interesting to see if there's anything else. Some of the best projects have been with creatives. Yeah, absolutely. And definitely takes the pressure off you being creative all the time. Absolutely. And even as a creative myself, you know, I love collaborating with other artists and learning about new skills. And I think, you know, we can all learn and continue to learn, can't we? So absolutely. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we're going to close the session for today, but thank you for joining us, everyone. If you do have any other questions, I'm sure that you can pass those on to us, and we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye.